Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Jennifer Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we have a very special guest, Michael Lee Hill, who actually been on our show several times, and he's returning. And Michael Lee Hill is an award-winning musician, filmographer, and UFO experiencer. His footage of the Lake Erie UFOs has created a Billy Meier-like buzz, and Michael seems to have developed an intuitive relationship with these crafts. In his home state of Ohio, Michael has been cataloging video after video of UFOs over Lake Erie, and the phenomenon consists almost entirely of pulsating orbs of light, unusual lights that are seen changing colors, converging and separating over the lake. Stories of the unexplained phenomena date back over 150 years to the indigenous North American Indian tribes. And Michael is a UFO Anunnaki researcher, and we're going to talk about the Anunnaki. And he says, I've discovered something that will change and unlock world history. I believe scientific thematic proof humanity is being guided into free energy by the heavenly visitors who came from the sky, the Anunnaki. And we're going to talk about the mathematical proof that the Anunnaki mound builders encoded these most harmonious cosmic 132 megahertz HD. Related frequencies, not only in two recent crop circles, one of which was actually signed by Enki, who we all know is Enki the Anunnaki himself, but these exact same most harmonious cosmic frequencies were encoded into the ancient North American mound building earth mounds locations as well. Dr. Reston, would you like to say something before we bring on Michael?
Just a few things. That Michael has a message of hope for humanity, that there is help, that someone's up there like us and are helping us. And the other thing I've been studying lately, Serpent Mound, and how it is that a site like a Serpent Mound has in it the code, the universal code for humanity, and aligning with a sacred site like the Serpent Mound can allow us to become coherent with sites, with the earth, with the cosmos, and I think that Michael's got the key to our enlightenment. So I'm really eager to hear the show.
Welcome, Michael. Hi, aloha. How are you? And welcome back to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing fantastic, and I'm really excited for the show today.
We're excited to have you. So I know you do research all the time and keep posting on Facebook, and you have a website, michaelleehill.net. What's new? What's the latest and greatest? It's been about, 6, 7, 8 months since we've last talked. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I'll tell you what has happened recently, which has been the biggest revelation of my own life and what's been unfolding was, before we even get into this, I guess for people that don't know the story, because this all ties into contact and who I'm learning actually with everybody else, my own heritage here on this planet, because I was, I almost wanted to say abducted. That's funny. Adopted is the word I was looking for. I was adopted. I was adopted at only a few days old, and I never knew my nationality or, my heritage up until the year 2008, and that's not too long ago. And that's when, because of my filming these objects over Lake Erie, the History Channel got a hold of me and ended up doing a show called Alien Contact. And they had mine and one other contactee. His name was Terrell Copeland. And they had us both flown to Boston and had our blood work done by a Harvard professor. And on the show, it was revealed we didn't have normal human blood. And at this point, I had no idea what that even meant, and they didn't either. They just, the same day, they sent me home and said, "Well, have a nice life." I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't a TV show, even though it was, but you just told me I have this unknown blood anomaly, and he's like, "Well, what do you think unknown means?" We don't know what to tell you. So at this point in my life, this was 2008. Again, I didn't know what this bloodline meant. I didn't know what it was, didn't know my own heritage. And so then let's fast forward to the summer of 2008 is my first meeting with the Anunnaki, or beings who came to me and said, "We've been known in your past as the Anunnaki." And they told me that I was part of their bloodline that was put on here a very long time ago called the Nephilim. And at this point, I didn't know what a Nephilim was. And so what has come out of all this is there's been a lot of evidence that's been coming out that the Nephilim are tied in with what has been known as the mound builders. And the interesting thing with this is there's now DNA proof through what's called haplogroups. And a haplogroup is a way like scientists use to just track back a DNA lineage through time and see exactly where it came from and when, it got to certain parts of the planet. And so in 1997, they found a brand new haplogroup, which isn't that long ago, and it's called haplogroup X. And haplogroup X only exists in the mound builders, the skeletons that have been removed from these mounds, which are usually giant skeletons. And also, interestingly enough, it's in at least 3% of the Iroquois and Native American Indian population. And I think this is something to talk about because there's no doubt that even with DNA testing that this bloodline were giants, 8 to 16 feet tall on average, that were removed from the mounds, but now they're not. And so something's been happening.
Are they on display somewhere, or have they?
I've heard the skeletons are. Yeah, I heard the Smithsonian has taken them and they've just disappeared. But I also heard in the Vatican archives, there's whole sections in the museum that are nothing but these giant skeletons. And they just don't fit in with the history that the powers that be have been trying to cram down our throats, that there's something else going on. But, it's really interesting to me because in my mind, it shows proof of genetic manipulation still to this day. It's like this, I guess you could call it experiment. It didn't end long ago. It's still ongoing. But the reason I'm telling you all of this is I just found out because of the History Channel, they told me that if I could track down my biological mother, I should, and see if this is a family trait or something that's been passed down. So for the first time in late 2008, I met my biological mother for the first time and my two sisters as well. And that's when I found out that I am Iroquois, almost pure blood. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was pureblood Seneca of the Iroquois, and that on my father's side was what was known as the Erie Indians, or the Montauk, Montaukett, and
the Montauk.
so I
about them. They almost extincted them, the Montauk Indians.
Yes, indeed. They wrote them out of the history books in the early 1900s, but they haven't went anywhere. They're still very prominent. It's just, but yeah, they tried to erase them totally out of the history books. You are correct. But so what's happening is, because of just finding out about my Native American heritage, I often thought, man, wouldn't it be great to be able to meet all these Indian chiefs and elders and be able to learn from them what has been passed down for thousands of years through them, And lo and behold, I was at a conference speaking in Columbus. It's called Angels and Aliens. And that's happening again this December, by the way. If anyone's interested, check it out, Angels and Aliens. It's in Columbus. And at the last one is when I met Chief Golden Light Eagle. Yes, indeed. It's going to be a good one because Chief Golden Light Eagle is going to be there again. And he was speaking at the conference that I was. And if people don't know, he is the guy that was on the Ancient Alien show speaking about the Native American contact with star visitors, going back a long time. And they just never really shared this information with us, But they've told me that Spirit has told them it's time for them to release with mankind everything that they know. So in doing this, Chief Golden Light Eagle started off a conference called Star Knowledge Conference that would bring all the elders and chiefs and grandmothers, because you find out in the Indian culture, it's actually the females who hold the most authority. Everything goes up to the chiefs, but then for something to be decided upon, it goes to the grandmother of that tribe, or tribes as it be. So the Star Knowledge Conference has just all these elders from all over the planet go to this conference, and the chief really just recognized who I was. I didn't even tell him anything. He said, we need the Nephilim ambassadors at the Star Knowledge Conference, and he asked me if I would come and speak. And so lo and behold, I guess sometimes, they say be careful what you wish for, but I think this is a blessing, because for the first time I've got to spend so much time with them. And what ended up happening was the first time that this happened was in it would have been October of last year, and it was for the fall equinox. And we ended up doing ceremony with all these elders at it's called Mound Bottom in Nashville. And it was, like I said, on the fall equinox, and all these elders were there to pray for a better, peaceful future for humanity. And, it's so funny. I didn't even know what was really going on. I got there, and I thought I was going on a field trip. I didn't know a real ceremony was going to be happening and stuff, but I feel very honored that I was there and part of it. And as it goes, I was asked to join them again at the Serpent Mound here in Ohio for the spring equinox, which was about a month and a half ago. And again, we did ceremony there, and it was really profound. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the things that I learned about Serpent Mound from them. But we can get into that in a little bit because it fits in with.
Yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll talk about the Serpent Mound later. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because during the ceremony, it was a seed and water festival, and found out a lot of what the Indians would actually use these mound sites for. But, just to jump ahead, one of the big things that I've been communicated in the subject matter of is the most harmonious frequencies. And the reason this is first of all, I'm a musician. I've been a musician my whole life, and now with today's technology, we can finally see what frequencies are creating perfect geometry. And there's two ways that you can get to geometry in life, and what we're talking about is sacred geometry. This is geometry that all of nature, from an atom to a galaxy, uses to create itself. And some people might be familiar with the Fibonacci sequence. is part of this, and the golden mean. There's very specific geometry. Well, one way to this geometry is through very high math and the analytical part of the brain, and trying to get there through, calculations and huge theories on a chalkboard. The other way to get to sacred geometry is through frequency, and frequency alone. What we're finding out is when you pump frequency, like they would start off in the past, it was, say, like a big circular metal disc, and they would put sand on it, and then they would have a bow, and when they bowed it, you would see the sand dance, and you would see geometry form. And it was very specific geometry. This isn't random. Every single time you hit a very specific frequency, this geometry forms. So they started to realize that sound is creating the geometry within this physical world, really. Because what happened is it evolved into they would take a big vat of water and have it suspended in a giant, like, tripod, where it was totally suspended and no vibrations could get to it. And then they would pump frequency through it, and they had a high-tech camera system that could then take a picture of what was happening in the water. And this new scientific study is called cymatics, for those that want to look it up. There's actually a very good TED Talk on cymatics, and I would highly suggest to take a look into that, because what you find with this is there is a very specific frequency that is the most harmonious, both cosmically and in our realm, and it's 432 hertz. And this number, you find out, has been so encoded into our reality. Even like this gets interesting because everything revolves around 432 hertz. And I can tell you some things that have been revealed to me about 432. For instance, and when you're talking in frequency, anytime you want to go to a lower or higher octave, you either double it to go to the higher octave, or you divide by 2 to go to the octave lower. So if you want to go to an octave lower of 432, it's 216 hertz, because 216 and 216 is 432. And then again, if you go lower, one octave lower than 216 is 108, because 108 and 108 is 216. And similarly, if you go down, the next step is 54 hertz, and then 27 hertz. And so 27, just to reiterate, 27 and 27 is 54. 54 and 54 is 108. 108 and 108 is 216. 216 and 216 is 432. And what you start to realize is the Anunnaki gave us a counting system that came through the Sumerians very long ago, and it's based on a circle having 360 degrees of arc in it. And no matter who you are, whether you're on another planet, you're going to come to the same conclusion that, if you divide a circle in 2, everyone's circles are the same. They probably won't call it a degree. It might be a shmezmar or something. I don't even know. Mm-hmm. I'm just joking. But that you're going to come to the same yes. You're going to come to the same mathematics. And one thing that they've stressed over and over again is the importance of dividing a number or multiplying it by 12. And, you look through, you got 12 hours of night, 12 hours a day, 12 months in a year, 12 days of Christmas, it's 12 astrological signs. It just goes on and on. But what's interesting, take 432 and see how many seconds is in 12 hours. It's 43,200. It is 432.
Mm-hmm.
So over and over, for a very long time, they've been guiding us into the importance of 432. Well, some people in I guess you could call it the New Age community, some people are starting to realize this, but there's also another group of people who, because of certain spiritual practices, they know that the numbers 444, like I was talking to Chief Golden Light Eagle, and he said the Native American Indians have their instruments tuned to 444. And he told me that's an Arcturian frequency, which I didn't know. And he said, look into that and how it relates to 528. And 528 is another very harmonious frequency. But the problem is it's this information, and I can explain why it doesn't need to be, they're not at war with one another. There's some people in the 528 camp that are saying, well, the 432 people are wrong. And the 432 people are saying, well, it's not 528, it's 432. Well, what I can share with you is, I was speaking with an Arcturian ambassador, dear friend of mine now, and we were talking about the subject matter of 432 versus 440, because people need to understand our musical standard was changed in the 1940s to 440 hertz, not 432. And using the same scientific equipment that I was explaining, when you pump 432 frequency through it, it creates perfect geometry. If you pump 440 through that exact same scientific equipment, it looks like a puddle of water. There's no geometry that's formed in it at all. So it's very interesting that someone shifted, our musical standard into a standard that is not in tune with nature whatsoever. But he said, well, let's take 432 and divide it by 12, because he said, how they've stressed the importance of dividing or multiplying by 12. So we took 432 and we divided it by 12, and what you get is 36. Perfect 3/6. And what I can tell you is look at all of the octaves of 432, whether it be 432, 216, 108, 54, or 27. When you add all those numbers up, they all equal 9. 4, 3, and 2 is 9. 2, 1, and 6 is 9. 108 is 9. 54, yeah. Isn't that something? But think of this now.
Yeah, let me just mention something. I just got something sent to me. It's a long conversation. It says, on the positive side, the Earth's frequency, according to the Schumann frequency measurement, has gone from 7.83 hertz just a few years ago to 16.5, which is double. Hence, the feeling of speeding up. Also worth mentioning is that the 16.5, 33, 66, 132, and 264 numbers are all harmonic to the solfeggio tone 528, and hence part of the ascension process. Therefore, if we humans continue to raise the frequency and match the Earth's frequency, we will weather the change and become an Earth changes. For those who don't, which are the cabal, the plates, etc., they will not be able to transition by virtue of these frequency changes. So that was just sent to me, and here we are talking about this. Does that make sense to you?
Well, that's absolutely. Not only that, this is mind-blowing to me. I have the key for exactly what they're talking about, because, if you take 432 and divide it by 12, you get 36. As we said, add the numbers up, 3, 6, and 9. 36 is 9. When you add it together. And Tesla said once we understood the magnificence of the 3, the 6, and the 9, that we would unlock the keys of the universe. But my Arcturian ambassador friend, he said, well, let's take 440 and divide it by 12. And what you get is 36.66666666. He said, isn't that interesting? It's the closest one can get to sacred geometry whilst being an imposter. It's not it. But then, when all this was coming to me and I spoke to Chief Golden Light Eagle and he told me to look into 444, the thought occurred to me, well, if you can just divide a frequency by 12, I thought, well, what happens when you go up that, right now we know that 432 divided by 12 is 36, and 440 divided by 12 is 36.666666. Well, I thought, well, what's 37 times 12? You know what I mean? Just go backwards. And what 37 times 12 is 444. And I thought, wow, it's a perfect harmonic overtone of 432. But here's what happens is you keep going up the scale until you get to 44 times 12, and it's 528. Isn't that mind-blowing? And you can, and what's really important with what this is how I started being able, given a download to be able to see this, is think of the 432 octaves like laid out on a table, like on a two-dimensional platform. But then you got 432 as this focal point, but now we're going to divide 432 and multiply and divide it by 12, and it's almost like going vertical then. You see what I'm saying? But once you get to 55 times 12, you come to 660, which is, again, remember these numbers, 432, 444, 528 and 660 as being what happens when you multiply whole numbers by 12. And what I can tell you is within these frequencies, it started to be downloaded to me that the actual layout of these earth mounds incorporate many of these numbers into their layout. Like, first of all, you can think of 216 can be referred to as 2160, same way as 108 can be 1080, and so on and so forth. Well, many of these earth mounds through Ohio, the walls are 660 feet long, and other measurements will come out to be 1080 and 2160. These are all encoding the most harmonious frequencies right into the design layout of these earth mounds. That's mind-blowing, you know?
So we were
for us to decode it at one point.
Last week, and we were talking about the significance of these sacred sites. So what have you found is the significance of these mounds? What was their purpose from your research?
Well, what I've found is they have the knowledge of electromagnetic lines of energy that crisscross this planet. In England, they call them ley lines. And where these ley lines intersect, there's going to be a vortex of energy. And most of the time, that's where they would put one of these earth mound structures. And say the serpent mound, first of all, let me tell you one thing. People need to go back and just Google serpent mound and crop circle 2003. And what people will find is a crop circle, which is pretty rare in the States, but not super rare, but was put into a soybean field in Ohio that was right adjacent to the serpent mound. And what happened was the day before the crop circle showed up, this woman walked out of her house and she seen these orbs of light in the sky. And she seen that they were making a very specific course through the sky, and she happened to be an artist. So she drew what this what shape that these things were making in the sky, and the very next day, that's what showed up in the crop circle for real, right next to the serpent mound. And interestingly enough, what I found out is I was watching a documentary that was showing what sacred geometry is encoded into Stonehenge, and it's the exact same sacred geometry that's encoded in Stonehenge showed up here in Ohio in a crop circle, and the day before a woman seen these orbs of light, and I think that they must have communicated it to her telepathically. But what I learned from the Indians that at the Serpent Mound is they said that the Native American Indians knew that these places were energy vortexes. And for instance, with seeds, in times of drought, they would take seeds, and they said that you can still see this. Like if you go to Chichen Itza, you'll see these little containers of seeds going up the steps, and people think that they've left them there as offerings. They're not offerings. They're going to go back and collect those seeds, because when they would leave seeds at an area of one of these energy vortexes, it would pretty much make the seeds turbocharged, and they would be impervious to drought. They would grow twice as big, twice as fast, and they would go there for the survival of their own people and leave seeds there. I didn't know that. I thought that was fascinating.
Wow.
Michael, Freddie Silva says it does the same thing to the people. It charges them with spiritual energy too.
Right.
I believe it. Let me tell you what happened.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're not supposed to be able to walk into the mound section when you go there. It pretty much says keep off. But because this was the Native American Indians, they had permission to enter us right into the mound. And one of the chiefs, he had said that the vortex is at the tip of the snake, the serpent's head. And he said, if you want to get a good boost of energy, just walk around the tip of the head and stand there for a minute. He said, if you feel that you have permission, you can come up onto the mound. And he said, I wouldn't suggest it. But if you think you have qualification, well, obviously, this voice is like, you need to walk up there, Michael, you know. But I did it when everyone left and there was no one there, no fanfare. And I walked up there and it was very strange. I felt like, it kind of felt like, you know, like this whirlwind of energy around me that was spherical that started up. And I kind of felt like a little lightheaded, and I only stood there for about maybe 15 seconds, but it felt really good. And there's definitely some type of energy there. But yeah, I would. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of Freddie Silva's. I went and seen him here speaking at Lakeland Community College. This must have been 5 years ago. So I'm a big fan of his as well. So it's cool you guys talked to him.
Yeah, he was just on, I think last week, right? And so he was talking about these sites are all over the planet, and you can actually, using probably your sacred geometry and your ley lines, calculate where you might find them. And then Dan Winter was saying about the seeds. We just talked to him yesterday, and he said that they used to select the areas where to build their sacred sites based on if the seeds would grow. If a site made the seeds grow a certain way, then that's when he would decide to build their sacred temples and mounds and all over the planet. It wasn't just North America. It was all over the planet. It wasn't just America. It was all over the planet. Fascinating.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though. What's fascinating to me is in Ohio specifically, though, to me, knowing that these most harmonious frequencies are encoded, unless they were being guided telepathically, that is we're just catching up with this knowledge right now. So how did they have this knowledge to even encode into these sites thousands of years ago? I think it's fair to say, and you can prove that this information came from the Anunnaki, and it's part of our number system of counting that was given to us by them so long ago. So I think it's a very interesting talking point. Well, what are they trying to communicate? You know, what they've left it here for us to decode for a very long time. So I think that there's specifically, I think that these sites, and there'll be a square and a circle. And I heard also that, you know, and with the Templars, which we can get into that, by the way, that's a big part of this, that the Templars talk about squaring a circle, and a lot of higher math is squaring a circle. I said that a lot of these sites here in Ohio and New York and Pennsylvania, the square and the circle have the exact same amount of interior volume, which is squaring the circle. It's very high math. So I think that this information alone is going to blow out of the water that these were savages and didn't have any knowledge of higher wisdom, you know.
Well,
and what's really coming out.
The story of the Anunnaki, they had colonies in the Americas, in North America as well. So it's just been lost by, I guess, floods and wars and everything. But now, and even the Mormons, they talk about the colonies that were in the Americas. And so we think it was just recently discovered, but it apparently goes back thousands of years.
Yes, indeed. That's a strange thing because I'm not Mormon. Actually, you know, I don't see how this is going to cause that much of a stir because what we're talking about kind of validates most of the world's religions. It might not be what people have made it into, but, you know, the Nephilim is in the Bible, the Elohim, you know, is who we're talking about. It's all there. And even in the Mormon, you know, the Mormons, the one angel that appeared to Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon religion, was named Moroni, and he told Joseph Smith that he had been a Native American Indian for many, many lifetimes. But before I forget, I got to share with you guys something very, again, historical, and that is, you know, my work with A.R. Borden and, you know, the stuff that was done there. They had told me in the past, we don't even know how you can be living where you're living because you're almost smack dab on top of the vortex there. And what I found out is, well, Indians, the Native American Indians, didn't live at these locations. They understood that they are truly vortexes of energy, and they're going to amplify whatever mental energy you bring into that area. It's going to be amplified, whether it be light or dark, unbiasedly, you know. So they would make sure they did ceremony and sage themselves and got rid of any negative thought forms or, before they ever entered those areas. And now, like, what I'm going to tell you is I'm working with some prominent people, I'll tell you, but the first site of the mound builders ever was in my hometown, and this isn't known yet to the world. It's East Lake, Ohio. And how this came about is because of A.R. Board and saying that, I started thinking, well, I heard talk because I grew up in this city, and my mother worked for Happy Mother's Day to everybody, by the way. My mother worked for the city of East Lake, so I heard talk growing up that there used to be an Indian mound. So the first time in my life, I stopped up there, and sure enough, there's a monument that sits right at the front of the school, and it says this was once the site of the Whitsley Indian culture, and it gives a date. Well, it wasn't the Whitsley Indians. That was the name of the surveyor for the Army who surveyed the place in the late 1800s. This happens as well because the same group of people have been known as the Hopewell Indians. Well, Hopewell was just the name of the farmer who owned the land that the mounds were on. It's like they don't know really what to call them. So what happened was I posted a bunch of this information onto my Facebook wall, and I ended up getting a message from the East Lake Historical Society. And they said, we really liked what you posted, and we want you to know that we have some artifacts that are at City Hall that were removed from this mound. So I went up there, and that's where on the wall for the first time I seen a newspaper article, and it read, East Lake was the first home of the mound builders. And I was like, wow, before they went and made Serpent Mound, before they went west and did the Newark earthworks, they were here in Ohio. And sure enough, in the description of what was here, the walls were 660 feet long, 25 foot high mound wall structures. Again, we got the 660, which is showing up in all the other earth mounds, and it is one of these most harmonious frequencies. It's 55 times 12. And so right now, as I found out, the Natural History Museum is doing I got to think all this is connected because they're working on renaming this Indian culture, and I'm in contact with them as well now because I'm talking with the Indian elders and chiefs and grandmothers to bring a Star Knowledge Conference event here to East Lake, Ohio to announce to the world that this was the first site of the mound builders. And all this information will come out about the most harmonious frequencies being encoded into these sites. Matter of fact, I'm talking to Giorgio, the crazy hair dude from Ancient Aliens, and he just shared this information himself, which I thought was fascinating. So I'm really excited that this information is going to get out there, and I think we will make leaps and bounds when we start working with these frequencies and seeing what they do, because even take 432, 444, and 528. If 432 is the root frequency of creation, it's been said that 528 works at the level of DNA. It's very specific. So this might be a key to what frequencies you want to tune into for what you're trying to accomplish. You know what I mean?
Right.
But this is, I think we'll all learn together, which I think is fascinating, because this is brand new knowledge that I guess we're remembering, because it's not really just uncovering. But
well, I remember when I was a kid in Pennsylvania, a bunch of us kids, we found a mound, and it was all covered in trees. We were drawn to it, and I had never heard anything about the mounds, and we said, this is something. It really is something. It has an energy just coming from it. And so here it is, 40 years later, and we're talking about the mounds and the mound builders. So if we could plot them, we could find the other ones, that it creates a grid, a ley line in the sacred site. So we might be able to correlate this information and graph it out and see, look in the different areas and see if we can find the other.
Well, part of it might be that when you become one with the site and you're in harmony, then all the information that site has encoded and you come together and you can access one another.
Mm-hmm.
That resonates with me. I'll tell you that I've got confirmation that why I was guided to step up onto the mound there is exactly what you're saying. They've been waiting for someone to decode it, you know? And any of us, I think, when we stand up there and we resonate with these, because I believe that all of us are part of this first wave of awakeners, you know? And so I think any one of us, if you stood up there, things start to unfold in your mind and you start to begin to get revelation. I'll tell you one thing that's been on my mind, and I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to this, but when I met the Anunnaki for the first time in 2008, they used a wand that had a purple diode to read my pineal gland, and from what I understand, they can access the Akashic records that way and see exactly who you are. But I remember him saying, we're going to remove your memory blocks. And I thought, well, how would forgotten memories even surface into someone's reality, you know? And at that time, I didn't know I was Native American Indian. I didn't know of the Nephilim. I didn't know of that whole history. But what I want to tell you is even more interestingly, what I think this is a proof of, and I got a lot of proof to back this up, is who we're talking about who became the mound builders is the Atlanteans. Well, the remnants of the Atlanteans. And what I found out is truly, Edgar Cayce called them the Poseidians. Well, you know who Poseidon is, yeah. Right? It's Inky. Right. It starts to make sense. Yeah, the man from Atlantis, right? But from what I'm understanding, Atlantis is where the Nephilim were brought into existence. And here's where it gets strange. As I can tell you from now meeting the Native American Indian elders, they've told me that this knowledge that I'm sharing now has been passed down through the Native American Indians, and I'm talking that the Atlanteans, the remnants, are the mound builders. This knowledge has been passed down through the last 5,000 years of written history of Native American Indians, and for the past 10,000 years of oral history that's been passed down. So in particular, you know, when I just last seen Chief Golden Light Eagle, he came up to me and he said, "So you're one of those Iroquois?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, you're one of those Atlanteans." He goes, "That's heavy duty." Oh. And I'm thinking, here I thought I was on the cutting edge of information, you know. I'm like, what, am I the last to know here? Because they already know. And I got a email from one of the grandmothers, and she said that she really liked some of the information I've been sharing about the mound builders, and she agreed, and she's the one that told me that this information of the mound builders being the remnants of the Atlanteans has been passed down through the Native American Indian cultures. They know this. But what I can tell you is this is fascinating. Edgar Cayce, because he did so many readings on Atlantis and the Hall of Records that's supposed to be under the Sphinx's paw, what he said was that the Atlanteans, it didn't break up. The Atlantis didn't break up in just one Earth movement or Earth change. There was three different Earth changes. One was about 50,000 years ago, one was about 28,000 years ago, and one was about 10,500 years ago. And he said that the one that was 28,000 years ago coincides with the biblical flood, and it would have been a pole shift that in the Anunnaki story where they knew that the crust was going to slip, and that leads into why the Nephilim was even created. And by the way,
the flood was more like 10,000. It was 10,500 ones. That might be the flood.
No, according to according to Edgar Cayce, that 28,000 years ago was and then the 10,500 years ago was not a pole shift, but like an asteroid impact that caused some problems. But they said that they knew it was coming, and what happened was all through these different three breakups, the elders stayed behind to hold down the fort, so to speak, and that at the last breakup, what's interesting is Robert Bauval in his work with how the pyramids in Giza line up with the belt of Orion, those stars, but they only line up 10,500 years ago. And like Angkor Wat has a star constellation that it aligns to, but it only aligns 10,500 years ago. All over the planet, all these sacred sites, if you just rewind the clock back, because you can see where the stars were in the sky yesterday, right? Or you can a year ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. Just keep looking and wind the clock back, and when you reach 10,500 years, everything locks into place like a puzzle piece of them explaining something in the actual creation of these sites that were pointing to 10,500 years ago. But what Edgar Cayce said happened was these Atlanteans or Poseidians went to the left this time, and because this continent was between the European continent and what became the North American continent. So they go up to the left and enter the bottom of the North American continent. The first people that they met, the indigenous culture, were the Mayans. And they taught them the Mayan calendar and pyramid building and higher mathematics. They said it wasn't until darkness set in and they started self-sacrifice and human sacrifice, is more what I was trying to say. That's when they decided, well, I don't think these people are getting it. Let's keep moving north, and they went north up until they actually dead-ended into Lake Erie. And that's where they set up home. And what's weird is, how the Templars have encoded a lot of information, like even into the street map layouts of like Washington, D.C., where there's sacred geometry encoded in there. What I can tell you is the Templars must have known exactly who this race was, because what I want to share with you first of all is getting back to Edgar Cayce, because it all ties in with this. He said the Atlanteans became the mound builders who intermingled into the Iroquois tribe of Indians still to this day. And, when Edgar Cayce lived, what was that, early 1900s? Not until 1997 was haplogroup X discovered in real DNA testing, and the only place that it exists is in ancient Israel. The mound builder skeletal structures, bodies that have been removed from these mounds, and in 3%, at least 3% of the Iroquois tribe of Indians to this day. I say still, like 3% is only because a lot of Indians have never been tested. That number could be a lot higher. But so one of these lost tribes of Israel are the mound builders, and they came here. And what I want to tell you is none of this ever clicked until just very recently, but there's a road, and I guess it's the oldest road in this whole area of the United States. Guess what the name of it is? Lost Nation. And it goes right up. It's about 5 minutes from my house. It goes all the way up until it dead ends at Lakeshore Boulevard, which is right at Lake Erie. Now, if you take a left, you're going to be at the first site of the mound builders in about 3 miles. But if you take a right, it's written in the street names of this area already what happened to this lost nation. The first road you come to is Iroquois. The next road is Seneca, then Mohawk, then Cherokee. Seneca and Mohawk are both Iroquois tribes. Cherokee is DNA blood relatives of the Iroquois. They just went and moved to another part of the United States. Then the next road you come to is Tioga. I'm thinking, well, what the hell's Tioga? How does it tie in? So I typed in Tioga, and it's Iroquois language for peaceful valley. All the names there tell the story of what happened with this tribe. And so I'm really excited right now to be working with the East Lake Historical Society, the Natural History Museum. Some of the artifacts I'm having decoded by some of the chiefs, like I said, Chief Golden Light Eagle. He's going to take a look at this stuff. And what I found out already is one of the artifacts has a symbol on it that is also at the Zuni reservation of the Zuni Native American Indians. And so it ties the two cultures together right there. But yeah, I'm excited.
Do they have any stories explaining how there's a connection between the since the haplogroup X is in Druze, a minority population in Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And so it's very high. That's the greatest frequency. And then it has, how did they get from there to North America? Any explanation coming from your Native American friends as to how
No, well, all I could tell you, no, all I've found out, the last thing that I found out was just a confirmation that these people are the Atlanteans. It was Chief Golden Light Eagles telling me to look into 444 frequency, which kind of unlocked this for me because, you know, I'd never heard of the 444 frequency or why it was important. I'd heard of the 528 stuff, but I never knew how it was all related until Chief Golden Light Eagle told me to look into it, and it kind of just, I didn't even know how to start, but it kind of just unfolded in my head anyhow. I can tell you that he knows that Chief Golden Light Eagle is who I'm talking about. He knew I was Nephilim before I didn't tell him, and he knows that
what is Nephilim? Could you kind of define that for our listeners? What is Nephilim?
Nephilim is the Anunnaki human hybrid, and or I guess we should take it from the Bible, because they call the Anunnaki in the Bible are the Elohim, and it's right in Genesis. It says that, you know, the Elohim made a hybrid bloodline on this planet, and they called it the Nephilim. And I actually got some confirmation from someone very high. What time we got here? Because this might.
We got 51. We got 5 more minutes, and then we'll go to the break. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what. Let's save some of this for afterwards because it's going to get in depth. But it's all about Galzu and who Galzu is in all of this.
Oh yeah.
Because I've been getting some confirmation from inside sources, and I've always thought that he's like the most important character that no one's talking about, you know? It's, if anyone really, I mean, you know, yeah, he's the one that was, you know, came to Inky in a vision and gave him the blueprints to create the Ark, you know? But, yeah, that's all a part of this as well, of who this is. And but what I can tell you is that I've received message. Yeah, because the interesting thing is, I think I shared some of this with you, Sasha, but the word came down from them that my understanding of what the Anunnaki, they call them the Sam, we're doing here is sound, and that that more information and knowledge will be granted now. And they said that what I know won't change. It'll be a good base now to start learning more. And pretty much the message said, if you think things have been moving at a fast pace now, you know, strap yourself in, because you're about to be inundated in revelation and news. So, matter of fact, there was some information, some new stuff, but I've not even had the time to sit down and read this. But it was actually a lot about the work I did with A.R. Borden and what happened behind the scenes and who those people were that we pissed off. And so I want to take a lot of time and read that. But this information is all related to Galzu. So after the break, let's get into that. I think it'll be a fascinating turn of events.
Right. Yeah, because for those who followed the Anunnaki story, like you said, Galzu was a character who doesn't appear to be Anunnaki, although he was able to appear as an Anunnaki. And he came down and gave Enki the plan for the submersible, which was Noah's Ark. And he basically, we owe our existence to this Galzu person. He's a mystery figure in the Sumerian text. Sasha, are you there? Question?
I'm here. Yeah, basically the Anunnaki leaders, Anu, decided that they had been manipulated all from the get-go to do the things they did here on Earth by Galzu, that had actually planned for the hybridization to take place, and for the people of Earth to ascend, that it was all unfolded, and Galzu ordered his sons to foster us and help us achieve ascension, to be able to be one with the cosmos. And of course, the method of doing that was coded right into the sacred sites. And the sacred sites were usually protected. Whenever you see a serpent, that's often a symbol of a node in the Hartmann a net, where the telluric lines come into crisscross, and that's everything's there, all the knowledge in places like Serpent Mound, and that's where you can become one with the. First of all, if you're prepared and if your heart is pure and that's what you're doing, you become one with the universe. You become one with all knowledge. That's the Akashic records, however you want to phrase it. But it seems like that's what's happened to you, Michael, and that you've got that you're there and that you're a messenger for us.
Well, thank you, and that's what they tell me, and all I can do is try to be the best messenger possible,
Okay, well, hold that thought. We will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you, listeners, and after the break, we're going to talk about Galzu and the Anunnaki and AR Gordon. See you in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. The heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
It's dead.
Are you on?
We're live here. Sasha, are you with us?
Aloha. Yeah, so one moment, my phone call my phone again, please, and I'll do a little commercial while you're calling. This is the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson. Hold on, I'm getting the phone.
Let these rings take you more deeper into this subject.
Okay, hold on. I'm back. Sorry, I hit the unmute, and all of a sudden it kicked me off of the phone. I don't know why I did that. I just pressed the unmute. But before we get back to our show with Michael Lee Hill, I just want to remind everybody to go over to that link on the website and click it and donate what you can. $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, whatever you can donate. We appreciate your donation, and thank you very much for your donations, because they allow us to bring you shows like this and many others on Revolution Radio. Welcome back, Sasha. Michael, I've got to close the door. Please feedback. I'll be right back.
So we're going to start with who is Galzu?
Do you want to tackle that, Sasha?
I would just what happened in the Lost Book of Enki, according to Sitchin, translating a lot of ancient Sumerian stuff, is that when Enlil, the commander from Nibiru, said to we got to get out of here. The Antarctic ice sheet is going to slip into the South Sea and cause great big waves to reverberate all over the earth. And so Anu, the king of Nibiru, sent a bunch of huge rocket ships to take whatever gold and personnel wanted to return to Nibiru back. And Galzu came on one of these ships, and he was this white-haired guy, and he had a sealed document that said, "This is from the Anu, the king of Nibiru. I am his plenipotentiary spokesperson," and Nimma, the daughter of Anu, said, "Gee, I don't remember you." Oh yeah, well, you just don't remember me, but you've grown old here, and you must stay on.
Hello?
Well, that's interesting, huh?
Are you there, honey? I can't hear you.
So, so Nimma said, "Well, okay, I don't remember that, but we'll stay here." He said, "You got to orbit the planet and not leave," and so forth. And Enlil said, "Well, let all the hybrids, the slave race, perish, because they're an illegal slave race anyhow, and let them go." And Galzu managed to give Enki the plans. It was a computer disk, which Enki put into his son Noah's wall computer, which showed him how to make this submersible. And Enki sent his son Ninagal to pilot this craft. And evidently, this was going on all over the planet, not just with Enki. But in any case, Galzu intervened in several places, and finally Anu called everybody together, and he said, "It's obvious that we have been manipulated to come to this planet. As a matter of fact, Homo erectus, the ancestor of Bigfoot, was here planted to be our help us adapt our genome to this planet, and we are a special species that has been created, and it's the will of the Creator of all that we support and encourage the evolution and development of these people. And of course, this gets subverted, and the mathematics of it, of course, is part of what Michael's discovery is, how it got subverted and how we can return to the real knowledge of the structure of the universe, from the structure of the molecule to the structure of the way planets function, to everything that is. The mathematical numbers that are the key to everything are encoded in the temples themselves, and it takes an adept like Michael, who's pure of heart, to be the one to really read it and share it with us.
Well, thank you. I find it very exciting, you know. I feel like we're all doing it together. Like we're all part of, you know, releasing this, and I find it so needed right now because truly, if this is, first of all, are you guys hip to the America Unearthed TV show?
No, we don't.
It's
have
on the History Channel.
Out here in the jungle.
You're probably better off, but this guy's an archaeologist. He's like a real life Indiana Jones, and just make a long story short, he's proven that the Templars brought the Holy Grail, which is what we're talking about, here to America long ago, and he's found the hooked X symbol, which is the sign for the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, really, which, you know, that, man, this stuff gets so religious, and I'm not religious, and that kind of scares me a little bit, but it is what we're finding out. Jesus and Mary Magdalene were of this bloodline we're talking about. It's that simple. There's a lot of other members as well, but I wanted to share one thing about the whole story of Galzu, and like, because as you said, he was not Anunnaki. He was considered to be an ambassador from all that is. And when Galzu showed up, Enlil, Anu, and Enki listened intently, you know, and cherished his words because they knew of the level that it was coming from. I think this right here is an interesting fact that the Anunnaki didn't consider themselves to be gods. They knew that there were higher intelligences on the totem pole of the galaxy. You know what I mean? Because they knew Galzu. So I think, but I guess they could consider themselves gods in the description of being creators, because they are creator beings. But
in their annals, when they talk about how when they were faced with crises on the planet Nibiru, they prayed to the Creator of all. They knew they weren't gods.
Yeah. I think that's important for people to know that they're just beings like us, maybe a little like they might be in 8th grade and we're in 7th grade. And from what they've told me, you know, there's just always teachers here to help us remember that our mental energy has energy, you know. Be mindful of what you're thinking about. But what I want to say about this is the Anunnaki that came here to mine gold, even way before mankind ever set foot on this planet because of their creation, they were called the heroes. And that was because it was like a life sentence for them to come here and mine gold. And how I was told to think about this is, if you're aware of a paradox, it's called the twins paradox by Albert Einstein. And what he said was, if there's two twins on a planet and one twin got on his spaceship and traveled even half the speed of light for 5 years, when he came back to Earth, his brother would have been dead like 500 years ago. And actually they touch on this subject in the new movie Interstellar, that when you travel at different speeds through space, you actually experience time differently. And they said that they've proven this, even though it sounds crazy, even at the speed an airplane flies. If you have an atomic clock on the plane and a counterpart on the on the surface of the planet. When the plane lands, it'll be a few milliseconds off from its Earth counterpart. It said that, now think about, instead of getting on a ship and traveling half the speed of light, well, another planet itself is traveling at different velocities and experiencing time differently. And when they would come here to mine gold, they would prematurely age. And they looked at it as a death sentence. And that's why the whole revolt started. It wasn't like they just wanted to create some, Homo sapiens out of the monkeys just for shits and giggles. This was a life or death situation for them. And because they were revolting, it was a death sentence. And I don't hear that talked about a lot, because it kind of puts the turmoil that they were in, or the calamity, why Inky thought it might be a good idea. But as you're saying, Sasha, it looks like Galzu was behind this whole thing from the get-go, and I think that because what you need to understand, not you, but the listeners and everything, is when Galzu gave them the orders, that first of all, you can really start to understand why Enlil was pissed. He didn't want to be here anyhow because he's prematurely aging, and now he's told by Galzu he can't even leave. He's like, what the hell? But when you look at when this happened with this flood and Galzu giving the information to Inky how to build the ark, it was said that right before the pole shift, Enlil took all of the elders into a meeting, and it was discussed what they were going to do, and it was decided that since it must be God's will, they're going to let us perish. That didn't sit well with Inky, because him and his sister were the geneticists who created mankind, and they looked at us as family because we shared DNA. And they started removing energy from the food sources on this planet, and it got really bad even before the pulse shift, that there was cannibalism and really horrible things because there wasn't the energy for food was being removed by the Anunnaki. And the last straw was they told Inky to go and remove the fish from the oceans. And, pretty much if the king ordered something, it was unheard of for someone to disobey. And he had never disobeyed, even though he had he definitely had his own personality. It wasn't easily just, persuaded, but he went out to remove the fish as ordered, and he couldn't find himself to do it. So instead, he made a pilgrimage to his mother's side, because he found out that Inky was not pure Anunnaki himself. And I'm getting more and more confirmation of this, that Galzu and Inky's mother is of the same race. And that's why he had connection to them in the first place, and there was even connection there. So what happened was, unbeknownst to the Anunnaki, he went to Galzu's race, or his mother's race, the elders, and said, isn't there anything that can be done that, my brother, or my kind, is going to let this upcoming species just perish and not even lift a finger? And they said, well, even if we do build this ark, will mankind evolve fast enough for this end of this grand cycle in December 2012? And the answer was no, because even in the Sumerian clay tablets, mankind was brought into, their word for it was the Eden, the Eden. Well, that sounds familiar, right? And
right.
So what had happened was, because of, they said really we were more like pampered pets at this time, and there was no catalyst for change. Like, we were more like pampered pets. There was no starvation. There was no homeless. We helped them with the toil, and some of them really loved us, and we were, they said that some of them aboard the ships wept, and just when this all went down. But what I can tell you is they said, well, if they're not going to evolve fast enough, why even try to save them? Building an ark and saving them, if they're not going to evolve to weed these fear and doubt-filled thought forms from their own psyche, because there's only one way to do it. You You got to do it yourself, each and every one of us. And they said, well, what if we could do something like put in an experiment to make them experience their own mental energy in an accelerated fashion, both light and dark, unbiasedly. And well, the elders said this had never been tried. You can't just do that to an upcoming race unless you're willing to incarnate as human and walk a mile in their moccasins, and you go through this process yourself from the inside, so to speak. So this is when the Nephilim was even created. But what had happened was, Inky goes to his mother's side to ask for help, and how that help was given is, as you said, it was in a vision from Galzu. So right there it shows you that Galzu and Inky's mother are related. You see what I'm saying? But I think it's interesting that all along it's Galzu who really put this whole plan into place, like you said, to help us ascend. And what I just found out, this is some unbelievable information, is, with the Nephilim, right now it's like there's so many people who are saying that the Nephilim are behind the oil and banking families, the secret societies, the Illuminati, the Skull and Bones, the Rothschilds, on, and they are the ones that are pulling the strings behind the scenes. And I'm here to say, what does that have to do with the Native American Indians? Nothing. There's a big missing part of this story, and it's Inky's bloodline on this planet, and it is the Holy Grail, and it is, if any bloodline on the planet is going to be the purest content of them, it would be Inky. He created the race,
So that's interesting. What you're saying, let me just slow this down a little bit. So Inky is half Galzu. Galzu was a higher level awareness species, and they were directly reporting to the creator of all. The Anunnaki had the awareness of the creator of all, but they didn't have any direct communications with the creator of all, except through prayer like we do. Kind of like you don't know if you're getting an answer to your prayer or not.
Yeah, see?
So what about that Nimrod?
Indeed, there's a direct connection.
Was she the same mother as Enki, or what do you have about Nima and her and Enlil? Who was the mother? Who was their mother? Anu was the father of all three of those.
You know what? That's
children.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know at one point then, after Inky was born, he got out of that relationship and started a relationship with a female Anunnaki, and that's why Enlil got the throne, because he was pure blood. I don't know where Nimna sits in that.
Right.
I don't know.
I thought you might have the information.
Yeah,
well,
I don't.
We know that they had concubines, so it wasn't like they had to get out of one and go into the other. The relationships were simultaneous.
Well, I think what the point you're bringing up is such an important point, and that is, all through time, this is the first time of new blood coming into the Anunnaki family tree through Inky's side. Up until that point, which was a long history, even before Inky was born. This is the first time that there was new blood flowing through their family tree, and I think exactly what you're saying. A lot of people don't understand that there's two separate bloodlines that flow through the Anunnaki, and one is pure Anunnaki, and one.
How did they? What was their society like? Was it interplanetary, not just one planet? We're just one planet. Were they truly in like a federation where they did have interactions with other species in the universe, or in the galaxy at very least? So these are all good questions. I want to ask you one more thing. You said that they had to walk among us. So are you saying, and this is what I got like in a download, I'm in communication with the Anunnaki too, so this is very relevant to me. So you're saying that they walk among us. So does that mean that Enki and Nima and Thoth and all these people incarnate into, I want to call them like human avatars, those who are the Nephilim bloodline that can they have the chi to handle a Anunnaki soul coming through a human form. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Am I off?
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, perfect. Because any single member of the Nephilim is going to have an Anunnaki higher self. And how I define higher self is the Michael Lee Hill that reads a newspaper or watches TV is not the Michael Lee Hill that's keeping my immune system going, my heart beating, my body regulated to have this human experience. That intelligence, obviously, is a much higher intelligence. Now, there's some people that can start to take over some of those aspects. Of the monks, they can control their body temperature and their heart rate and whatnot. But most of us, the ego portion of the self is not your higher self. What I'm saying is every single member of the Nephilim is going to have an Anunnaki higher self, whereas the mass consciousness of the earth is going to have a human higher self. Like soul group, I guess you could say it. So there's two different, and the only reason that the Anunnaki ever incarnated here was to help. It was at the same time when Enki went to his mother and the ark was devised and the Nephilim was created to try to steer the experiment from the inside. But what I'm telling you is the true Nephilim became the mound builders. Or first of all, they were the Atlanteans, then they were the mound builders, and then they intertwined into the Native American Indians. This is not the Illuminati. And a matter of fact, these people have been more oppressed and suppressed and had genocide committed against them. There was 19 million Native American Indians here, and right now there's about 400,000. That's hard to even wrap your head around, that kind of loss. And what's really funny to me is, I think that this is going to be a really funny lesson in the most paradoxical way for some of the European settlers that came here and did this, and still to this day accept this illusion that the Native American Indians were savages. They're going to have to come to terms, even with their own Bible, that they committed genocide against one of the lost tribes of Israel. This is a group that they were said to revere. You know what I mean? There's
a big movement to take Andy Jackson, who's a genocidal ethnic cleanser, off of the bill, the $20 bill, and to put Sister Souljah and Native American women, a series of great women on the $20 bill, and stop worshiping people like Andy Jackson, who are mass murderers.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think this is all about to be revealed. And yeah, go ahead.
When you met with Marduk, so with that in mind, and you are probably an Anunnaki incarnated in human form, for the lack of any other way of putting it, I too identify with being Anunnaki on kind of like a soul level, or however you want to say it. I strongly identify with Nirma, and I've always been wrestling with that, like how can I be, more than one thing. But anyway, when you met with Marduk, did they give you any more hints about who you might be? Or do you think you may have been one of the Anunnaki that was more well known, or just part of the gang?
No, I know exactly who I am. It's interesting. I've been guided recently to how to handle this, because there's no doubt in my mind, and this information has come from the universe through synchronicity and coincidence that's led me to it. But the easiest way to say it is I would be Inky's human counterpart, if you want to look at it that way. Inky here in human clothes. But no matter who you are, it's how it works. When you come here and become human, you, at the moment of your birth, you plug into the human mass consciousness. All the fears, all the doubts, all the love, fear, thought forms, at birth into your DNA. And you experience it exactly the same no matter who you are. The only thing is that some of us that are here to help, you could consider us spiritual warriors, and you'll you'll go through like a span of pretty much just the most fear-based stuff going on in your life. You'll go through fear in a 4-year period that would take a normal human lifetimes to go through. And it's like shedding the skin and starting to understand that no matter who you are, your mental energy is creating your experience. And all you have to do is choose love, and it doesn't matter who you are here. And but these things are not really taught. They are in the Eastern cultures, and I think that this is part of what needs to be understood, that mental energy has reality. Thoughts have energy. And we know even with today's physics, energy can't be created or destroyed. It needs to be transmuted, hopefully into its higher frequency, you know. Well, no one's really asked the question, how do you transmute a negative thought form? How do you bend it into its higher octave of love? Well, the answer is you live it. It comes up in your own personal 3D existence for you, hopefully, to choose love over fear. Because let's face it, and we all are going through this, myself included, the stuff wouldn't be coming up in our lives if we still didn't have a fear base attached to it.
Right.
And fear wears many masks, and we're all connected to the mass consciousness. And what I learned is even if you go through and do all your own homework and you weed out all the fear and doubt out of your own belief system until you're a clean vessel, guess what? You're still attached to the mass consciousness, you know? And it'll still, and to me, it's harder to see ones that I love around me going through their trials and tribulations more so than me going through it myself. And
well, that's because you're connected.
So,
you're one with them, and so you can't really. That's why in therapy, siblings, there might be one sibling that gets to eat, the other one's watch, but it feels the same for all of them because they're connected, like you're saying, in the mass consciousness. So they're feeling it. So you're feeling it. And
yes,
so
indeed.
that's so true. We've been trying to symbol this and figure out how to express it, but I just love what you said, Michael. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's really important and why we must learn even spiritually to center ourselves in the midst of turmoil. So when you enter a room that might be filled with negative energy and negative thought forms, that you don't take them on yourself because it's very easy to do. Matter of fact, I was told that one of the main things to start to understand and work with your own mental energy is the very first thought in your head is from the mass consciousness. And it's usually a voice filled with a lot of fear and a lot of doubt, and it's going to be in your own voice, in your own mind, but it's going to say, man, am I getting screwed again? This is happening again, you know? And if you don't say thank you, what else is available, you'll own that thought from the mass consciousness. And like I said, you're probably not going to like the manifestation. To become a creator, like I love this story because Bruce Lee, when he would have a feeling of fear and doubt, he would write it down on a piece of paper and then burn it and give it back to the universe and say, all right, thank you. Now what else is available? Because until you sever that connection to the first thought form that enters your mind, you're doomed to keep recreating it. For me, I started to learn mental energy had this, you know, manifested, and I really started to realize, well, why is my internal dialogue so negative then? I'm just being very honest with myself, you know, and I asked the big man upstairs, am I doomed to just keep, if this first thought that comes in my head is always so negative, am I doomed to just keep experiencing that manifestation? And what I got was a download of a big record player, like one of those that had a horn on it, you know, and a big needle that drops down onto the record. And it said, it's just a recording. And at that moment, I understood it was like a multidimensional message that out of this moment, there's a million probable realities of what this could be, from anything from the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark. And I'm going to tune into these realities by what I'm focusing my attention on. So by it saying it's just a recording, I understood that's just the lowest common denominator of all the possibilities. And what I like from that point forward, when that voice comes of fear and doubt, I say, thank you for showing me what I got a fear stamp on. I appreciate it. Now what else is available? And until you do find your own way of processing that and cutting that cord to the mass consciousness, you're going to create out of the mass consciousness. And that's not being a creator. That's being a reactor, you know?
Well, I call it changing the channels or going to a new lane. You know, it's like a multi-lane highway, and if you're in this negative, bad stuff, you just want to get over and get off the highway and go somewhere else. That applies both individually and collectively. So if we did this as a species, we'd get out of this fear porn. I call it fear porn. The fear-based reality that we're going to have Armageddon or Planet X coming.
Wait. Did you say fear porn?
Yeah, I call it fear porn. But that's
great.
Give us fear porn. You know what?
Can I use that?
Yes, please.
That's great.
I didn't originate it. I heard it somewhere too, and I went, wow, that's exactly what's going on. Our media.
Yes, these melodramas, you know.
Fear porn to make us react in the way they want us to, which is, like you said, the first thought. And now we just say, interesting, I'm going to change that channel. What else is there? How you symbol it? And if we do that individually, collectively, we win. You know, we go into a paradise multiverse that feels good to everybody. We're just going to keep shifting it every day.
Yeah, I think I think we've made it. I think you're right, and I think all this was, you know, I think Galzu knew what he was doing, because even from their own words, they told me that they feel, I'm talking from Marduk and the Anunnaki, that
Sasha, you're breathing
we have earned the right to eat.
Go ahead. He gets into the mic inside, doesn't realize it. Go ahead.
He's meditating.
Yes.
Sasha, come back.
I'm here as you know, in what I do with say a fear or anger or something like that. Instead of dissing it, I say, angry side. What do you want, and why do you want it, and what do you really need that is consistent with the ecology of myself and the others in this planet whom I love? And when I do that, I find that the fear or the defensive thoughts really are the key to the vulnerability and oneness with all that is underneath it. If you trace it down, you can use the fear to free yourself from being its slave, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's beautifully put. I think we need to be conscious of what we're thinking of. Think about what you're thinking about. You know, because turning your attention inwards, it's not taught that much. You know, to start being aware of your own belief system and what's in it. And a lot of these things, I got to tell you, I learned a lot of these principles, and it wasn't from the Anunnaki, and it wasn't from the Wingmakers, which, by the way, is very connected to all this, and A.R. Borden, as it turns out. But I just want to say, because I don't stress this enough, that my own spirituality, when I asked the universe for some answers because of some trauma that was going on in my life, I was guided to the Seth material channeled by Jane Roberts in the 1960s. And that's what changed my life and really made me understand that, you know, belief, which is thoughts, feelings, and emotions, create our physical reality. But yeah, I think we all need to start understanding. And, you know, A.R. Borden brought this point to me with, you know, a lot of people, your listeners, will probably be familiar with the 100th monkey, you know, where, you know, that once information spreads, once it hits a certain threshold, which the story out there has it at 7%, that it then spreads throughout the whole mass consciousness. And scientists witnessed this in some monkeys that they were studying, and these monkeys would pull potatoes out of the sand, and that one of the monkeys sooner or later figured out to take the potato to the ocean and wash it off. And not only did it get the sand off, but it left a little salt on it and made it taste better. Well, that monkey taught its sibling, and before you knew it, they were teaching each other. And the story goes that, just to make the math easy, there's 100 monkeys on the island. When the 7th monkey taught the 8th monkey, not only did the 8th monkey start washing his potatoes, but all the other monkeys on the whole island started washing their potatoes simultaneously, ones that had never been taught. It was like that intelligence spread throughout mass consciousness, almost like a spider learning how to spin a web. And not only did it happen on this island, but a whole nother group of monkeys were being studied on another island, isolated from this other island, and simultaneously all the monkeys on that island started to wash their potatoes. What I can tell you is A.R. Borden's people know it's not 7%, it's only 3%. It only takes 3% of us thinking in a new, more love-filled way that has a more better outcome for everyone involved. And it doesn't take we've been taught that we don't have a lot of power as an individual. And what this is showing us is we have more power than we've ever thought. And it doesn't take many of us coming together and thinking in a new way before it spreads throughout the mass. 3% isn't that much, but when you look at 7 billion people, though, it's still a large number to put together. But that's what the plan was with the Linkage Institute, is to bring 3% of humanity to the table to start to be able to communicate with these beings.
Okay, so what's the Linkage
I think we're there.
Institute? Who is Borden, and what's all that about?
A.R. Borden was a gentleman. Man, this gets complicated. Before I even met the Anunnaki, I was led to A.R. Borden, and it was because of my study of a bed of information called the Wingmakers. And what had happened was I seen some documents that were released from the inside, which dealt with a subject called Light Encoded Reality Matrix, or it's LERM. And what it is creating physical objects from light. Tibetans do this, and they call them tulpas, where they'll meditate on the thought form of a revered monk with such tenacity that that monk will appear in the physical, manifest for real, innate with its own consciousness. So what they wanted to do, the NSA, the remote viewers, is turn this into a science of light and sound, the actual physics of being able to learn on demand, which would be in our light of a miracle. If I held out my hand in front of you and said apple, and an apple appears in my hand, that's what we're talking about. Well, this was released in the Wingmakers information. I found this information that had been leaked onto the web, and I tracked down the source, and it was this group called the Life Physics Group. Ends up A.R. Borden was the head of that group, and I contacted them and asked them for a copy of the material. They were pretty shocked. They were like, how did you come to be contacting us? And I said, well, if I had to answer that, I would say the Wingmakers sent me, because it was my study of the Wingmakers who guided me through that whole process of, from my just being intrigued with it to know it was a reality. Like, if people want to know what I'm talking about, go to wingmakers.com, and in specific, read the Dr. Neruda interviews, and they're very, very in-depth. But I can tell you, that's a whole other subject, but there seems to be some proof that very recently another very high source of galactic intelligence has taken over the Wingmakers, and they still are Anunnaki, but it's not the same source of information from the previous. But what I can tell you is read the Dr. Neruda interviews, and what you'll find is this is the group of the NSA who looks into the extraterrestrial subject for the powers that be, and look into, they're the ones that are involved already with these reverse engineering programs, technology transfer programs is what they call them, with these beings. And by the way, it's come out now that Eisenhower met in 1954 with a bunch of groups of extraterrestrials. Well, it's coming to light now that one of those groups was the Anunnaki. and it was Inky's side. And the information that this was the Anunnaki has been confirmed through Bob Dean, which I'm a big fan of Bob's. He was a member of NATO and very high-ranking member of the military-industrial complex. He said that the Anunnaki came down and pretty much we weren't ready for that reality in 1954. Eisenhower had put together a team of humans. One guy was a cardinal, another guy was a reporter, and so on. I think there was about 6 of them that went to meet. And when the Anunnaki showed up, the ship came down, but it didn't land. It just hovered over the runway for a couple days while these meetings were going on. And it was said that they didn't get out, like a ramp didn't come out, and they walked from their ship down and walked into the building. They just materialized inside the meeting room, and when they spoke, it was telepathic. And this was just too much for some of these, mankind at this point. They just kind of shattered their realities, But the message from them were that they're not invaders. They're not going to come down and just take over, but they wanted to help mankind get to unlimited free energy and use it in a responsible way, which is kind of what we're talking about right now, and unveiling that these most harmonious frequencies are already encoded on this planet. And by the way, we got to get into the Inky crop circle and the one before it because it's very important. But matter of fact, out of all this, it's probably, I don't know how much time we got left. That's probably more important than anything.
Okay, let's go
jump
back.
to it.
We have about 18 minutes left.
Yeah, what I can tell you is they said the only stipulations on their end was that we had to get rid of our nuclear power ambitions because we didn't truly understand what we are dealing with, and ends up they were right. And also A.R. Borden told me in 54 that they wanted to instill what our government looked at as an Anunnaki kingdom on this planet, because one thing that they are worried about is the administering of free energy on this planet. And pretty much the idea was, what do you think that ISIS would do with unlimited free energy? What do you do with the thought forms of some humans have? If they had unlimited free energy, they're not going to do anything good with it. But this was in 1954. Our government wasn't willing to do that. So I asked AR during our interview, I said, well, what's it going to take to get another offer on the table? Because I think we could use some help even cleaning up the mess that we made, like in Fukushima. And he said, what makes you think that we didn't start working with them in 1954 behind the scenes and develop things like we're talking about? LERM is actually an Anunnaki technology-assisted technology. And another one was called ENS, which was electrical neural sensing, which is, imagine remote viewing that's Anunnaki technology assisted. So not only are you remote viewing, but when you send part of your consciousness to another location, it doesn't even have to be this timeline, then they can make enough energy at that new location to bring down a new avatar, physical avatar. So not only are they observing another location, but they can operate in it. They could, if they were remote viewing a bar, they could go and drink a beer. You know what I'm saying? But that's some of the technology that he said that they've already been working with from the Anunnaki behind the scenes. But from what I understand, within the next 5 years, I hate giving dates and stuff too. I've never done this, but I trust where this information was coming from. And he said we will be having contact with the Anunnaki. All this isn't leading up to nothing. You know what I mean? Regardless of my opinion, they're showing up worldwide right now in an escalated rate in these, chariots of fire, orbs of light.
Right, the orbs we had a fellow on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the orbs, and what he thought that they were plasma, not necessarily plasma ships, but the plasma field was around the ship, and that's why you can't really see the form of the ship, that it generates these fields. And I saw these orbs in Pennsylvania when I was very young, and they were quite large. They would come low, just about treetop height, and they were very large. And so tell us a little more about all that, but finish your crop circle thing before we go to the next thing.
Yeah, well, real quick, let me tell you, from what I understand, the orbs are what is known as Merkabas. They're, physical light vehicles, and they can create different size orbs. A single Merkaba is going to be about 3 feet above your head and about 3 feet below your feet when it's ignited. And it's truly spinning your energy fields around your body in a specific way where it ignites into a miniature sun, and you're inside of it. And once you're inside of light, you get to go anywhere in the universe free pass, because light is truly one of the only things not bound by our physics. So what you're doing is making a little miniature supernova and igniting it around yourself, but that's one person. Then what I was told is 3 people, all igniting Merkabas, can come together in a triangular shape and then make about a 50-foot sphere of light. And then 3 of those, which would be 9 people if you follow the math, can create a large physical triangular UFO that 9 of them can create one huge craft that then thousands of them can use, and it's in service of 3 of them creating it. But orbs, I don't think that, I've been contacted by Bigelow Aerospace, and the investigator said these things are not what people think. When you think of UFOs, we think of nuts and bolts and a physical saucer. He said these orbs have more to do with time travel and portals than they do anything else, and that was from Bigelow Aerospace. But let me share a revelation that I had, and I think this is very, very important with all this in talking about free energy. In 2011. There was a crop circle that showed up in Italy, and in it was the name. You know what? I got to stop and go back here. You need to know.
Go back, okay.
In 2008, when I first met the Anunnaki, and they told me I was one of 2 brothers that incarnated, and sooner or later I was guided to the information, probably early 2009, that I have connection to Inky, or the universe is bringing me information that I am Inky incarnated as a human. I didn't know even what an Anunnaki was at the original meeting. I sure as hell didn't know who Inky was. To me, it was almost like someone coming up and telling me I was the Easter Bunny, And so I asked him, I said, well, if this is the case and you are who you say you are, I'm very interested in the UFO field. Put the name Inky into a crop circle. I can guarantee you I will see it, and I will know then you are who you say you are. The next thought that was in my head was, boy, that's really ridiculous. Can you imagine a big crop circle that just had in cursive Inky written in it? Who the hell's going to believe that anyhow? But I thought, well, you'll figure it out, And then I'm thinking, well, while you're at it, why don't you encode something into it? I will only be able to decode, and you'll be able to figure it out. Well, this is, like I said, late 2008 to early 2009. Well, in 2011, for real, a crop circle shows up, and encoded into it in binary is Inky, Ia. And I was like, wow, okay, But what's encoded into it is what's even probably more fascinating, because of my study of cymatics, which is making a new technology that we're talking about that makes sound visible by pumping frequency through a liquid medium, be it water. Excuse me. That I became interested because I'm a musician. I started tracking down the actual cymatic images for like 432, because 440 doesn't create anything. So I went and I did the research to track down every musical note in the musical scale, but tuned properly to what they call Pythagorean tuning, because Pythagoras knew all this, which is interesting. So what I found was, like we said, to get to a lower octave of any frequency, you just double it or divide by 2. So as we're saying, 27 hertz. His octave is 54, then 108, 216, 432. So in reality, 27 hertz is 4 octaves below 432. So why I'm telling you this is I had a 27 hertz frequency in cymatics, and it made a perfect 7-pointed star. The 7-pointed star is what the Inky crop circle is created from. And what you find out is also the 7-pointed star, this exact reference to 432, is what they created. The Babylonian world map that sits in a museum right now is a 7-pointed star, which is, no one knows this yet. I think it's so fascinating. But so you got the Inky crop circle that's encoding a 27 hertz cymatic image of a 7-pointed star with the name Ea Inky. A lot more is encoded in that. But what you find is the year previous, in the exact same location in Italy, another crop circle showed up, and it encoded in binary code in the same method that the 2011 Inky crop circle was encoded. This one in 2010 encoded E equals MC squared. Well, what you find out, and by the way, E equals MC squared crop circle was formed on a 6-pointed star. And what you find out is that's created by a 36 hertz frequency, and it's 4 octaves below C when you're tuned to 432. So why I'm telling you this is both the 6-pointed star and the 7-pointed star are both encoding harmonious frequencies from this frequency grid. And why I'm telling you this is all scientists know now that physical matter is both particle and wave. Well, when you think of the equation E equals MC squared, it's the particle part of the equation. There's no wave, there's no frequency component in that equation. E is energy, M is mass, and then C is the speed of light. Here's where it gets cool. There's an encoded frequency in this, because what you learn is 432 squared is the speed of light. So what I'm telling you is, if you work the equation backwards, that only when C is vibrating in the harmonious framework of light, which is 432, because 432 is squared is the speed of light, that if you worked it backwards, like, say if you're not in 432, you're not going to have a 27 hertz frequency. It'll either be 26 or 28. And the only thing that's going to trace that circuitry back to get E, energy, is 27 hertz or 36 hertz or 108 hertz or 216 hertz. All these frequencies are going to plug into this algorithm properly. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's actually the blueprint they're giving us to free energy, because I really started thinking, well, man, should I be even talking about this stuff live? Because, you know, let's just take it if a heavy metal band started.
It's out there that it's going to be such a negative thing, because if it is out there everywhere, you know, it'll move us past this money-based culture. So I think that's the greatest thing that's going to happen. Is we're going to go into a society that's based on some other system instead of this slavery-based monetary system that keeps most of us in corporate economic slavery.
I totally agree, and it's inevitable that I think any upcoming species is going to go through this. Either you're going to evolve technologically too fast and not evolve spiritually, and you could self-implode, and I'm sure many cultures have done it, but with the spiritual teaching, they have to be balanced. And to be honest with you right now, it worries me a little bit I see the kind of behavior of some humans and how they're, even learning about what happened to the Templars, what happened to the witches in Salem, what happened to, what happened to the Indians from these European settlers, which isn't that long ago. These thought forms are still there. And what they told me was, I'm not talking Anunnaki. I was pulled into a meeting of like high-ranking elitists, so to speak, and they wanted to tell me why this information had been withheld from humanity. And pretty much they said once free energy is released, and I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just saying it was a very interesting point. And then, in a nutshell, it was just, what do you do with those that would misuse it? Because everyone will have access to unlimited free energy because it's unlimited and it's free. So they said, what do you, they're asking me this, what do you think that person in the Middle East that would take a woman out in the middle of the village and stone her to death because there's a rumor that she was having an affair or something, or, these people like ISIS that are slaughtering women and children. what do you think that they're going to do with their unlimited free energy? And I'd never really thought about it before. And I was like, wow, well, that definitely is something to talk about. I think it's inevitable, and it is the evolution of a planet to come together and start operating as a whole unit. You know what I mean? But I think maybe with this revelation, because one thing that we can say is the Anunnaki are intertwined in all the world's religions. And I think that them returning to set the record straight and free mankind from the oil and banking families might resolve a lot of the negative thought forms.
Right. They created these religions to keep us separate from each other. But once the real history is revealed and we have full disclosure, we'll realize that was just some propaganda that was created. There's spirituality, we don't want to negate that, but the dogma and the concepts, principles were basically a bunch of the factions of the Anunnaki warring against each other. Enki and Enlil and Inanna and Marduk appear to be the four factions that were separating and creating a lot of the wars. So anyway, we have like 1 minute.
Yeah, one.
No, we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So I'm sorry, it's 58.
Well,
55 right now.
Well, it's been a great show. I've really enjoyed. You know, sometimes when we do these, I there's such a learning curve, you know, and I hope that your listeners, you know, that know what's going on. And it's just, you know, sometimes I just can't start at the beginning every time. So I appreciate this chance to be on your show multiple times and being able to kind of take off where we last were, you know.
Right.
So thank you for having me.
Go deeper into the subject. We still have like 3 minutes. So what do we want to cover in the last 3 minutes for our listeners to kind of summarize this information? And we will have you back again for sure. Michael, we always love having you.
Oh, thank you. It's always a joy being here. What I can tell you is everything that I've just went through, I've created a new blog release on my website, michaelleehill.net. And all you got to do is scroll to the bottom, and it's the most recent blog post. And I went through and actually got a actual surveying map of all of these earth mounds all throughout Ohio mostly, and it has the dimensions in there, and I walk you through all the different octaves of 432 and then how I came across multiplying these and how you get these certain set of numbers. But then, you know, it just pretty much once you see it with your own eyes, it clicks in your consciousness that there's no way that, you know, sometimes 4 or 5 of these most harmonious cosmic frequencies being encoded into these earth mounds, that's beyond any type of mathematical chance or randomness. So I think right there is a big piece of the puzzle. And I think revealing who this group of the mound builders are, being the Atlanteans, and it makes perfect sense then that they had this type of information. And so go to michaelleehill.net and actually check out my whole blog section because
your crystal, your sacred geometry, Anunnaki cosmic 432 sacred geometry energy healing discs. What are they?
Oh yeah, those are my new babies right now. What happened was I hired a company called Simoscope I sent them a 20-second file of my guitar tuned properly to 432 hertz, and they sent it through their equipment, and I now own the result of that, which is actually history in the making. So you'll see that image on my website as well. Sounds like we got the music play out. So.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Right, everybody. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us once again. We will have Michael
Peace.
back again in the future. Peace, much love and
Aloha.